you think to yourself, this guy must know what he's talking about. Maybe he's right when he's questioning if vaccines are safe and effective. So the seed of doubt on vaccines gets planted. And then at your kid's next wellness exam, you decide not to get them the next round of vaccinations. A few months later, you're taking them on a trip to Disneyland, to get them say for spring break, where countless other parents like you have heard the same medical advice from the same person, and you too decided against vaccinating your kids. It only takes one of those kids carrying a deadly disease like measles for an outbreak to begin. And pretty soon, after what was supposed to be the spring break trip of your dreams, your kid,
I guess,
sadly, is showing symptoms. President, what follows then is another
you
issue
know
of
what I
doctor's
might do
appointments,
is I might shut this
stay in the
down.
hospital, sleepless nights, missed days of work and school, not to mention dread and fear for your child's very well-being. Meanwhile, countless other parents around the country that went on the same trip to Disneyland are now experiencing the same exact nightmare you are. Sowing the seed of doubt in the minds of just a few people can have massive consequences for communities across the country. And it is not hypothetical. Right now, there's a measles outbreak in Texas that sickened more than a dozen kids. The number of kindergartners showing up with an exemption for required vaccinations jumped to a record high last fall. The two facts are connected, and Mr. Kennedy and his allies can take the credit for it. Now, Mr. Kennedy is fond of saying he's not making recommendations about whether parents should vaccinate their kids. He's just asking questions and giving people choices. That's a slippery tactic used by conspiracy theorists to dodge any real responsibility for their words and actions, and it's absurd coming from somebody who's about to be confirmed for a job that is entirely about making recommendations. Mr. Kennedy is also fond of saying that if somebody shows him the science to prove he's wrong, well, then he'll apologize and retract his statements. But when somebody does show him the science proves him wrong, he just brushes it aside and basically will not accept it as fact. Once again, to quote my Republican colleague Bill Cassidy directly, to improve the health of Americans or undermine it, always asking for more evidence and never accepting the evidence that's there. That's why Bill Cassidy told Mr. Kennedy he was struggling with his nomination. So even Republicans like Senator Cassidy, someone I work with frequently on the Finance Committee and respect his opinion, he knows how dangerous this guy is. And it is not hyperbole to say that when Mr. Kennedy becomes Health and Human Services Secretary, if he does, and has control over how our government rolls out vaccines or make them available, I believe kids in America will die. And when disease rates for illnesses that have effective vaccines start to rise in states across the country and hospitalizations and death tolls mount, my Republican colleagues are going to regret voting, if they do, for Mr. Kennedy today or early this morning. And when disease rates for illnesses that have effective vaccines start to rise in states across the country and death tolls, mount, again, we will see Republicans say, this is something that could have been prevented. What else should we have done? Republicans will be responsible for every child that dies as a result of not being vaccinated because it seems they care more about staying in the good graces of Donald Trump than they do about protecting the lives of kids. Again, this is something they will regret for years to come. Now, before we turn to Senator Murray's remarks,
are you guys getting any echo off this mic? I'm kind of curious.
Choice,
not from me, from the guy talking.
Our leader for years and years in the Senate. In the lead up to and during his failed presidential campaign, Mr. Kennedy repeatedly claimed he supported a woman's right to make her own health care decisions. Less than a year ago, in an Instagram post on June 14th last year, he stated that he supports the emerging consensus in this country that abortion should be legal up to a certain number of weeks. Fast forward to his confirmation again at the Senate Finance Committee a few weeks ago. He was pressed repeatedly by Democrats about his stance on abortion. Instead of clarifying, Mr. Kennedy defaulted to a clearly rehearsed talking point that he repeated over and over again. Quote, I agree with President Trump. Every abortion is a tragedy. While that answer doesn't give us much clarity, it's certainly telling. Mr. Kennedy has a long history of changing his stance on healthcare issue after healthcare issue to whatever position benefits him at the moment, as long as it earns him power or it earns him a paycheck. As far as I can tell, Mr. Kennedy will believe, or at least pretend to believe, whatever you want him to. He's willing to give up his principles and all of his beliefs that women and mothers are better equipped to make their own health care decisions than politicians. And it's all about, as we've talked about on this floor, staying in Donald Trump's orbit of power. While Mr. Kennedy recites rehearsed talking points on the subject, this is an issue that has had real, deadly consequences for women, as Senator Murray has said again and again. Donald Trump spent his first term packing the Supreme Court with right-wing extremists willing to rip away the reproductive freedoms guaranteed to us under Roe versus Wade. In the wake of the Supreme Court's gutting Roe, millions
while
of
this
women
guy is
living in red
babbling,
states
let me
had
throw
their
this over
reproductive
here.
freedoms ripped away from them, all due to
Breaking
Donald
federal
Trump.
judge sides with
In the years
President
since
Trump
the
saying he
overturn
does
of
have
Roe,
the
there
authority
have
to
been
freeze or
countless
restrict
headlines
federal
about the
funding.
consequences of these abortion
So
bans.
yeah, that's the
Women
thing.
bleeding out
That's
in
the thing.
parking lots or in emergency rooms because they were denied care. Women becoming infertile and losing their ability to have kids in the future because they couldn't get care. And in the very worst cases, women dying. So it should horrify every American that we don't actually know where Mr. Kennedy stands. The man who could become our nation's chief health care officer, we don't know where he stands on reproductive health, short of perhaps just saying he's a yes man for anything Donald Trump tells him to do. So I think at this point, Mr. President, I want to yield the floor to my friend and colleague from Washington
I don't know.
State.
I think that's too dark.
She knows so much about the challenge of ensuring that women's reproductive health services are being protected. And as Secretary of Health and Human Services, Mr. Kennedy could do so much damage to the well-being and health of women, and I'm very pleased to be able to yield the floor to her.
So much damage. They can do so
issues.
much damage.
Mr. President.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to my colleague from Oregon who has very clearly stated why this nominee is not someone who should be holding the title of Secretary of Health and Human Services. And
I don't think they've even started debate yet. I don't think it's normally 1 hour's a debate divided 30 minutes apiece.
The American people are watching now with alarm because the vast majority of people know vaccines are safe, they're effective, they are life-saving. But we are now on the verge of confirming as our nation's highest health official, a man who has spent considerable time, money, and effort undermining that basic fact. A man who has abused his platform by refusing to acknowledge the well-established science that shows that vaccines are not linked to autism. Fear about that point, fueled by RFK Jr. and others peddling misinformation, is a leading reason that parents do not get their kids vaccinated against preventable, dangerous diseases. That is why elevating a man like RFK Jr. to lead HHS would be so dangerous. Just giving him any platform to spread vaccine doubt is dangerous, but to give him one of the biggest megaphones in the world, it is truly shameful that we even are debating this. My colleagues should know better. They actually do know better. They are looking the other way. They are choosing to pretend like it is in any way believable that RFK Jr. won't use his new power to do exactly the thing he has been trying to do for decades, undermine vaccines. Never mind the fact that CDC has already modified web pages with information about vaccines and other vital public health information, which a federal judge has now ordered the Trump administration to restore it. Never mind that the Trump administration is also reportedly planning widespread and significant layoffs at CDC and across HHS. This is how RFK Jr. substitutes his own beliefs for science. So when the vaccine conspiracy starts swirling and RFK Jr. turns HHS into ground zero for misinformation, I had no idea it is not going to be an excuse for confirming him, because at the Help Committee hearing, the chair pressed him repeatedly about the debunked claim that vaccines cause autism. And when RFK Jr. said he needed to see the evidence, he was shown the evidence. But to no one's surprise, he did not keep his word, admit he'd been wrong, and spread the good news that vaccines do not cause autism. He's had 2 weeks since that hearing to look at the same settled science as everyone else. Crickets. But he won't hesitate to quote the latest anti-vax conspiracy. He's totally up to speed on that front. Are my colleagues really buying this guy will take an impartial look at the science? If you think RFK Jr. will change who he is, you are lying to yourself. He has given no evidence to suggest that and all the evidence in the world to the contrary. Given his long and growing track record, we cannot just pretend if RFK Jr. finally gets power to undermine vaccines, a cause he has dedicated a considerable amount of time and effort to, that he'll just give up. That is not believable. And I know I've been talking a lot about vaccines because it is so obviously alarming. But the responsibility he would have goes far beyond that. So let's break some of this down. Both the ways he could undermine vaccines as HHS secretary and the other responsibilities that would be at stake. To start with, the CDC is under HHS. That means that the secretary directly appoints people to CDC's Vaccine Advisory Board. That board is responsible for making recommendations about vaccines, and it is those recommendations that determine whether or not certain vaccines have to be covered by insurance. So simply put, changing those recommendations will change what vaccines millions of Americans, including kids, will be able to get from their healthcare provider. If he is confirmed, there would be nothing stopping RFK Jr. from firing the entire board and replacing them all with vaccine skeptics. After all, he has said many times and in many ways, he thinks CDC is corrupt and bought by pharma, as usual, by the way, without any evidence. RFK Jr. would also oversee the Food and Drug Administration. That is another agency he has repeatedly tried to discredit and attack, where he says he plans to fire hundreds of scientists on day one, and an agency that plays the crucial role of making sure our drugs and our treatments, including vaccines, are safe and effective when we purchase them. Not only would Mr. Kennedy have a key perch from which he would undermine vaccines on a scale like never seen before, he could also use that platform to peddle quack treatments, no basis in science. RFK Jr. would also have jurisdiction over NIH. That alone means influence over billions of dollars in medical research, research that is responsible for a significant portion of our economy, and more importantly, research that patients are desperately hoping will help them find cures. But RFK Jr. could redirect those funds to promote his favorite pet conspiracies instead of promising cures. Or he could make good on his plan to fire hundreds of researchers and pause infectious disease research for 8 years. It should go without saying, viruses aren't going to take a break. And here's the thing, the attacks on medical research are now already happening under Trump. From his day one executive orders, President Trump has already been threatening medical research. Suddenly, all of our grants are at risk because they are looking at addressing barriers to care or understanding why Black and Native American women have higher maternal death rates. And now President Trump also is trying to illegally, arbitrarily, and suddenly change NIH guidelines to set an unrealistic low cap on indirect cost rates. That will mean researchers laid off, studies canceled, including life-saving clinical trials, and kids not able to get the treatment they need. All because President Trump and Elon Musk don't seem to understand how we actually fund important research and couldn't even be bothered to find out before taking an axe to our medical research labs. At a time when life-saving research like this is already under attack from President and the richest man in the world, no one who truly values medical research should vote to install one of the biggest attackers of medical science as the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Mr. President, insurance is another huge portfolio for HHS. Last time Trump was in office, we saw millions of people lose their health care coverage. The uninsured rate went up after years of hard-won progress. And we all know he still wants to rip up the Affordable Care Act, which will drive up costs and kick people off their coverage. There's no reason to think Mr. Kennedy will stand up to that effort. Indeed, there is no reason to think he has the experience and understanding of the system to actually do so. During his committee hearings, RFK Jr. confused Medicare and Medicaid. This is basic stuff. He failed to describe the components of Medicare. And yes, Mr. President, I do absolutely have to talk about abortion care. This is of grave importance right now. In his hearings, not only did RFK Jr. confess to having no real understanding of EMTALA, that is a law which requires patients have access to life-saving emergency care, including, in some cases, abortion care. He also showed that he will be totally open to Republicans' fact-free efforts to rip away access to medication abortion. Like so many other issues that RFK Jr. is simply wrong about, the science on that has been settled for many years now. Mr. Kennedy made clear, though, he's very open to revisiting access to the abortion pill based on a Republican argument against the science that basically boils down to nah. Putting up barriers to accessing the abortion pill or ripping it off the market completely, as Republicans have made very clear they want to do, would be absolutely devastating. And let's not forget about pandemic threats. The lies that RFK Jr. spread during the last pandemic already make clear he is not the man to do this job. But if that weren't enough, when there was a pandemic threat response planning session for this new administration, he skipped it. He didn't go. It would be almost comical if this wasn't so serious. Mr. President, everywhere you look, everything about this nominee is so concerning. We cannot take this man at his word, something he has changed and gone back and forth on time and time again, but we can take him on his record, which is that he has consistently undermined vaccine confidence. And by the way, note, he profited from that. And we can take the threat of what he might do seriously, especially given the alarming things that are already happening. If RFK Jr. gives you his word of honor that he won't freeze research, guess what? We're already seeing the Trump administration totally upend medical research. Thanks to the Trump funding freeze, NIH hasn't issued any grants award in weeks. If RFK Jr. swears that he's not going to take down information about vaccines, he's not going to silence experts, well, don't look now. But the Trump administration has already taken down or changed CDC pages about vaccines. They have already silenced public health experts. If RFK Jr. pinky promises you that he won't undermine medical science or studies or and he won't ignore global health threats, well, you might want to sit down for this, but President Trump has completely demolished our global health aid work. He has already completely demolished it. The fallout is utterly heart-wrenching. Already we know of a woman who died because the USAID-supported hospital she went to for oxygen was forced to discharge her because they got a stop work order from the Trump administration. It's not clear if she was the first death caused by Trump's complete freeze, but there is no question she will not be the last. And Mr. President, let me make a really important point here. It is not just people across the world who will be affected by this. There was a study being done on a new HIV treatment with thousands of volunteers. Study being done, already having 1,000 volunteers doing the treatment. But now, without their regular injections, which are cut off by Trump's move,
I can't believe you,
there's gonna be
Bradley. I
too
cannot believe you're
little
not
of the
like
drug in
running
their system
like some
to
earbuds or
protect those
something.
people from
Was you
HIV.
like, hey, who's that
But
cool guy you're
enough
watching?
of the drug that if
What's
they
going on, man?
contract HIV, it could mutate to become drug resistant. So for all the absolutely unhinged conspiracies we've heard about medical research from RFK Jr. and the like, where is the concern of this actual risk in this actual study happening right now, all because President Trump cut off foreign assistance? RFK Jr. has been silent about that risk, silent about how wrong that is. And so even as he is making these empty promises on one hand to some of our colleagues, he's already standing by as President Trump breaks them on the other hand. Oh, and here's one more. If RFK Jr. says he's going to consult you on healthcare personnel, please do not be fooled. Look, I don't know why my colleagues need me to
Quick
tell
test,
them
guys.
this.
Can you hear me
I
okay
to
like
think we have
this?
some pretty
1,
smart
2,
people
3,
around
4.
here.
And then if I
But
switch this
vote,
knob all the way over here,
RFK Jr.'s own nomination.
what happens? This should be
is your
just me.
consultation
It should
on
be
healthcare
nothing
personnel,
but me
not
right now.
same
Let
in
me
some
know in the
made-up
chat,
promise
please.
for
Going to
later.
turn it back to where it was.
This is the point you have the most power. Whatever he might say, you don't get to choose who RFK Jr. will appoint to this or that. Heck, he doesn't get to choose who President Trump appoints. The decision you get to make, all of us on this floor get to make, is the decision before us right now. You get to choose who you vote to confirm, and you will have to live with that decision. And if you ignore the warning signs and confirm RFK Jr., then when the wheels fall off the wagon, you may try to tell yourself you were lied to, but you knew who you were dealing with.
So
You
right
knew
now,
who you were dealing with.
you can
You knew
hear.
what he said before.
I'm wondering
and
if
what he
it's
has refused
sound
to
was
say.
loud and clear.
You had
Yeah,
all the
I'm just trying
knowledge you
to. There's a
needed
knob
to
on
do the
this
right thing.
this microphone
I
that
cannot
says that
tell my
I can
colleagues enough.
separate
This
the audio,
is
and I'm
not
looking at
a
the meter
game.
on it,
This
and
is not a
it's only picking up my
political
voice
role
right now.
without
But
consequence.
apparently, you
The
guys
health
are
secretary
not hearing anything.
has
It didn't
real
change
power
at all, which is
over
kind of
whether
weird. So I'm
Americans
wondering if
can
like
get
she's not coming through my
basic
mic
information
or
and
whatever.
care
Let me do
that
this.
impacts whether they
Maybe we
live
try something
or
like
die.
that.
As
How's
I've
my
tried
voice
to
on this one
drive
right now,
home
and how
throughout
can
this
you hear her
process,
as well?
Vaccines save lives. That is not a question. It is not a slogan. It is a fact. If when parents look to you, worried about their newborn, wanting to do what is best for their baby, and trusting your advice as a public health leader, if you cannot tell them the same truth that centuries of science and experience tells us, which is that vaccines are safe and effective and life-saving, then you have absolutely no business leading the Department of Health and Human Services, none. And so just as I did at the hearing, I want to warn all of my colleagues, by merely voting to confirm Mr. Kennedy,
I'll figure it
you would
out.
be
At some
telling
point, I'll
our
have to be a
constituents
professional and
he's
figure this
worth
out
listening
without
to
doing it during
on
a live
vaccines.
stream. But I do appreciate
That
you guys
alone
as usual.
will get
Do me a
people
favor, guys. Put a 1 in the
before
chat
he
real
even
quick
listens
if
to
you
him.
love your country.
Because he
That will
does
help
not
with the
even
live
need
stream,
the
draw a few
levers
more
of
people in
power to
here.
get
And if you
people
haven't hit that
killed.
thumbs up
All he
button,
needs is
please
that
do
many
that
votes.
now. It's greatly
To
appreciated, guys.
affirm his views by voting to confirm him as our highest health official, let's not mince words about what that will mean. When babies die from whooping cough because parents weren't sure if the vaccine was safe, will you be able to look them in the eye? When the flu sweeps our nursing homes, when measles sweep through our communities, will it be worth it? Mr. President, I will end on this. I'm sure there are plenty of members who know perfectly well just how dangerous it would be to confirm RFK Jr. They don't need to hear it from me. In fact, some of them even know the danger better than I do. But here's what I do know. Conscience is a muscle. Courage is a muscle. The less you use them, the more they fade away. So if my colleagues are feeling the pressure from President Trump, or if they're feeling the weight of the richest man in the world on their backs on this vote, I would warn them. This will certainly not be the last test we face here in the Senate. Giving into this pressure now won't make it go away. It won't soften the pressure you face later, and it will not strengthen your resolve when the stakes are higher. It will just show pressure works. If you do not draw a line somewhere, you will cross every line you could ever imagine. You will be pushed further and further into accepting things you thought you never would, things you thought you never could. I think most of my colleagues know what really is at stake here. I think most of my colleagues know what sort of man RFK Jr. is and what sort of damage he could do if he's confirmed. There are political realities, we all get that, but there is also right and wrong. There's fact and fiction. There's people staying healthy and people dying pointlessly, kids dying pointlessly from diseases that we can prevent because they thought Congress took its job vetting our health care secretary seriously. So, Mr. President, I urge my colleagues to show some courage. I urge them to show some conscience. I urge them to vote no on RFK Jr.'s nomination.
Friends.
Mr. President, I yield 30 minutes of post-cloture debate time to the Democratic leader. And I yield the floor.
How long did she just say? I swear
Senator
to God,
from
she said
Tennessee.
3 hours.
Thank you, Mr. President. I find it so interesting how people are watching so closely to see what this administration does. And I've been so pleased to see that the polling shows by an overwhelming amount, 70% of the American people agree with how President Donald Trump is carrying out his job, getting things done for the American people, things that they voted to see done. And he is keeping those promises. Now, when we look at the issue of
Thank God, Ian.
illegal
Thank God.
immigration, we see that in his first weeks back in office, what he has done at the top of his to-do list has been to take action to secure this border. The numbers that we are seeing, how they have dropped with the number of encounters, with the number of gotaways. This is encouraging. The message is out there. The U.S. is going to protect and defend its sovereignty. We are going to protect and defend our people. That is important, and we are seeing it. Now, the president has taken some executive actions that have yielded results. By executive order, he restored the Remain in Mexico policy. He restarted the border wall construction, which, by the way, Mr. President, this is something the Border Patrol has told us not for just a few years, but for decades. We need a border wall. That's where the phrase, build the wall, came from. It came from people that are down there every day protecting this country from harm. The president has also ended catch and release. Now, that's that practice where somebody comes across and then they get their paper that they're claiming asylum and they're told that they can go on into the country and go wherever, and there are nonprofits down there on the border, and they give them a plane ticket and food and a phone, and off they go to their desired destination at taxpayer expense. So that has ended. The president has also sent troops to the southern border, and thank goodness we are seeing these deportations of criminal illegal aliens taking place. Yesterday in Nashville.
So I'm camouflaged.
8
All right, I'll play your silly game.
In a human
I'm down.
trafficking ring. 8. 2 of them were linked to Tren de Agua. They were Tren de Agua gang members. Now, these are all things that the president is doing to make this country safe. And we have security moms all across this country, and certainly across Tennessee, that are reaching out to us and saying, keep it going. Deport those that are criminally in this country.
Is that better?
Let's carry this out. We're seeing such good results. In operations across the country, ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, has arrested 11,000 criminal illegal aliens including many violent offenders and gang members. Since Inauguration Day, migrant encounters at the southern border have reportedly dropped 87%. As I said, Mr. President, we are seeing results. We know that for years, former President Biden allowed more than 10 million illegal aliens to enter the country, including tens of thousands of convicted criminals and more than 1.7 million known gotaways. And for 4 years, Tennesseans and Americans across the country have suffered the tragic consequences, including rampant migrant crime. Recently, our Tennessee District Attorneys General Conference released a report documenting the widespread migrant crime in our state.
Well, that's true, West Virginia, Pappy, but their justification would be separation of church and state, my friend.
The report confirms what we already know, that during the Biden years, every town was a border town, every state was a border state. So our Tennessee District Attorneys General took the last 3 months of 2024 and they said, let's look at what is happening in these last 3 months and see how this has escalated. Now, of course, we know that under Joe Biden, violent crime rose 43% his first year that he was in office. And what we saw from the District Attorney General's report, that there were in 3 months, now this is a 3-month number, there were 2,719 reports of illegal aliens being charged or convicted of 3,854 offenses in the state of Tennessee. Among them, the most common offense was driving under the influence. There were 654 arrests of those illegally in the country driving under the influence. These offenses accounted for more than 13% of all DUI arrests across the entire state. And this problem is a big reason why last year my Republican colleagues and I introduced the Protect Our Communities from DUIs Act. This bill would automatically deport any illegal alien who is charged with driving under the influence. Mr. President, as I have gone across our state, in each of our 95 counties, which I visit every year, into each of these counties, I have heard from law enforcement, from police chiefs, from sheriffs, that these DUIs are such an incredible problem, and the number that are committed by those illegally in the country. Now, over this same 3-month period, illegal aliens committed hundreds of violent, heinous crimes, 154 instances of domestic assault, 80 of aggravated assault, 21 convicted of child abuse, 9 of statutory rape, 8 of sexual exploitation of a minor, 7 of vehicular homicide, 4 of murder, 3 of rape of a child, and the list goes on and on. As I said, over 2,700 illegally in the country that were convicted of more than 3,800 crimes. Disturbingly, these numbers are likely an undercount. Only 73 of Tennessee's 95 counties reported data to the District Attorneys General Conference. Under Biden, national data showed that illegal aliens were pouring in from countries all over the world, and the Tennessee Migrant Crime Report also reflects this. There were 92 unique countries of origin from Mexico and Guatemala, Jamaica, Romania. Here's the bottom line. because of Joe Biden's open border policy that was supported by far too many of my Democratic colleagues, thousands of crimes were committed by thousands of criminal illegal aliens in the state of Tennessee over just a 3-month span. And this, my colleagues, is just one state. This is my state. But we know this is happening in communities all across this country. More than anything, the report underscores the importance of President Trump's mass deportations, which are underway. There are many ways that Congress can support these efforts. My CLEAR Act, which I've talked about many times on the floor, would ensure state and local law enforcement officials have the tools to help the federal government deport criminal illegal aliens. This is crucial, especially when you've got far-left leaders like the Chicago mayor refusing to turn over criminal illegal aliens to federal custody. Now, General Bondi is suing these sanctuary cities for allowing criminal illegal aliens who have no right to be in our great nation to harm Americans. And thank goodness she is being tough on crime. I've also introduced the Preventing Violence Against Women by Illegal Aliens Act, which would allow the deportation of illegal aliens convicted of sexual offenses or domestic violence. Any illegal alien who commits these heinous crimes should be removed from the country immediately, and I encourage all of my colleagues on each side of the aisle, support this. And my Container Act would ensure that border states like Texas have the legal authority to place temporary barriers on federal land to help stop the flow of traffickers, drugs, and criminals coming across the border. There are thousands of criminal illegal aliens residing in Tennessee and across the country. We should be using every resource at our disposal to remove them from our country. In many ways, the bills that I've mentioned would help President Trump to get the job done. I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
Senator from Hawaii.
it is not often that the stakes of a vote to confirm a cabinet nominee
This guy is an
are
idiot.
this high.
You're going to love listening to this
But
guy.
tomorrow, when we vote on the nomination of RFK Jr. to be the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, the stakes will be life and death. Mr. Kennedy, in his words,
Yeah, we
but
may
more
have to jump to
importantly,
that
in
real
his
quick.
actions, has
Let me
proven
see if I can
over
find it.
and over again that he
I know
is
the
a
White House
unique
press briefing
danger
is
to society.
something that is
But he's
active.
on the edge of becoming the country's top health leader with the
Oh,
power
it's on
to
right now.
unleash
Like President Putin, wants
bygone
to make
diseases
peace. We discussed
and
a
undermine
variety of
trust in
topics having
science
to do with the
for
war,
generations
but
to-
mostly the meeting that is being set up on Friday in Munich, where Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of
Ask
Secretary
and you
of State
shall
Marco
receive.
Rubio will lead the delegation. I am hopeful that the results of that meeting will be positive. It is time to stop this ridiculous war where there has been massive and totally unnecessary death and destruction. God bless the people of Russia and Ukraine. I myself just spoke to the president about these calls, and he told me to tell all of you they were very good calls, they were very positive, and the administration is wholeheartedly committed to a peace deal to end once and for all the Russia-Ukraine war. More on that later. I'm sure you'll have more questions to ask. This week, the president has continued to deliver on his promises to the American people. According to new polling that was released at the beginning of this week by CBS News, an overwhelming 70% of Americans said that President Trump is following through on what he pledged to do during his historic campaign. The poll also revealed that Americans see President Trump as a tough, energetic, focused, and effective leader fighting hard to improve their lives and our country. And yesterday, in particular, was a truly special day for the United States of America. Thanks to the great leadership of President Trump and the strong and tough leadership of President Trump, Mark Fogel, an American teacher detained by Russia, was returned to American soil and met with the president here at the White House last night. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and the rest of President Trump's incredible national security team helped to negotiate the exchange that secured Mark Fogel's release. This event shows a good faith effort from Russia, and it's a sign, as I just said, that we are moving in the right direction to end this brutal war. Malphine Fogel, Mark's 95-year-old mother, was understandably very worried that she would never see her son again after his arrest in 2021. Mrs. Fogel was actually slated to join President Trump on stage at the July 13th Butler, Pennsylvania rally to speak out for Mark, and then the infamous assassination attempt against President Trump took place. But that day, before the rally, President Trump promised Mark's mother that when he returned to the White House, he would bring her son home. God saved President Trump's life on that day in Butler, Pennsylvania, and now Mark Fogel is back home safely with his family as a result. God is good. The president also continues to bring back common sense to our government. This week, he signed an EO to end the procurement and forced use of paper straws. Taxpayer dollars were wasted on these non-functional and massively unpopular products for no other reason than it made radical activists feel good about themselves. And on trade, President Trump continues to take bold action to protect America's critical steel and aluminum industries, much like he did in his first term. And the president signed proclamations to close existing loopholes and exemptions to restore a true 25% tariff on steel and elevate the tariff on aluminum to 25% as well. This administration believes these tariffs will protect our national security and put American workers first. And in the Oval Office yesterday with Elon Musk, President Trump took further action to make our federal government more efficient and effective. He signed an EO implementing the DOGE Workforce Optimization Initiative. Now agency heads will coordinate and consult with DOGE to significantly shrink the size of the federal workforce and limit hiring to essential positions only. The unaccountable bureaucracy will finally be reined in. On another important matter this morning, Senate Republicans continued to confirm President Trump's exceptionally qualified nominees, most recently Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, who will be joining us later at the White House for her swearing-in ceremony. It's imperative that the remainder of the president's cabinet nominees are confirmed as quickly as possible. On another important matter this week, illegal alien criminals continue to be arrested and sent home as part of the ongoing mass deportation effort of the Trump administration. Just this week, 2 planes with 190 Venezuelan illegal aliens arrived in the Venezuelan capital from Fort Bliss, Texas. Here are some of the criminal illegal aliens who were arrested in the country this past week. ICE Atlanta arrested a citizen of Nigeria who had been convicted of money laundering. ICE San Antonio arrested a citizen of Mexico who had been convicted of assault. ICE Denver arrested a citizen of Mexico who had been convicted of aggravated assault. And ICE Houston arrested a citizen of Mexico who had been convicted of aggravated assault. Now, before I take questions, I would like to address an extremely dishonest narrative that we've seen emerging over the past few days. Many outlets in this room have been fear-mongering the American people into believing there is a constitutional crisis taking place here at the White House. I've been hearing those words a lot lately. But in fact, the real constitutional crisis is taking place within our judicial branch, where district court judges in liberal districts across the country are abusing their power to unilaterally block President Trump's basic executive authority. We believe these judges are acting as judicial activists rather than honest arbiters of the law, and they have issued at least 12 injunctions against this administration in the past 14 days, often without citing any evidence or grounds for their lawsuits. This is part of a larger concerted effort by Democrat activists and nothing more than the continuation of the weaponization of justice against President Trump. Quick news flash to these liberal judges who are supporting their obstructionist efforts: 77 million Americans voted to elect this president. And each injunction is an abuse of the rule of law and an attempt to thwart the will of the people. As the president clearly stated in the Oval Office yesterday, we will comply with the law in the courts, but we will also continue to seek every legal remedy to ultimately overturn these radical injunctions and ensure President Trump's policies can be enacted. So here in our new media seat today, we have Chris Pavlovsky, an entrepreneur who has a strong passion for protecting freedom of speech. Chris started the video sharing
I love the
platform
way the new
Rumble
media
in
is set up.
2013 with a mission of protecting a free and open internet from censorship by big tech and governments around the globe. The platform has always been a place for independent creators to share their authentic opinions, and they have always included President Trump, in contrast to the way he was censored by other platforms in years past. Since its founding, Rumble has grown exponentially, recently marking 67 million monthly active users.
Oh, and I'll beat
That's a
her.
lot of users.
Rumble,
Right now
they
and
started a
interested in
White
staying
House
in
channel
the
on
seat,
Rumble.
Apply whitehouse.gov/newmedia. With that, I will take your questions. And Chris, why don't you kick us off on this very busy news day?
Carolyn, thank you very much to you and President Trump. It's an honor to be sitting here in the new media seat for the White House press briefing and to be able to demonstrate why freedom of expression is so important. Rumble was the victim of censorship at the hands of multiple foreign governments. It's clear there are still many countries.
I hate when they don't have good mics on these people.
Target American companies. Can you describe what the administration will do to protect U.S. interests and values worldwide?
Sure. Well, thanks for the very important question. And I think that free speech and ending censorship, both here at home and also abroad, is an important part of President Trump's agenda. I think first, President Trump has led by example on this front as the leader of the free world, the President of the United States, with his show of access and transparency on a daily basis. The President takes questions from all of you almost every single day and really reveals what he's thinking and feeling, and I think that serves as a great example to the rest of the world. As for tangible actions that the President has signed, he did sign an executive order, I believe on day one, certainly within the first week of this administration, to restore free speech and stop government-sponsored censorship here at home. And the EO made it very clear that federal employees are not allowed to engage in any activity that would infringe upon the American people's right of free expression. So I think the President has led quite strongly on this. And I would just add, this is part of the reason we have a new media seat, to invite new voices into this room. Again, we're going to need to expand this room because so many people are interested, and we're very excited about that. It's a privilege to cover this White House, but we want all voices to be heard. So thanks for being us with here, Chris, and I hope you enjoy the briefing. Sure. Jordan.
Thanks, Caroline. Data out this morning showed that consumer prices were up across a variety of goods, and just before that report, though, President Trump called for lower interest rates. The Fed said it's holding rates steady to try and tamp down further inflation. So how would lowering rates help keep inflation in check for the American people?
Sure. Well, first of all, on the inflation point, we did receive those numbers, and they were worse than expected, which tells us that the Biden administration indeed left us with a mess to deal with. It's far worse than I think anybody anticipated, because unfortunately the previous administration was not transparent in where the economy truly was. We know people at this very podium told the American people that inflation was transitory and that it would go away. That was not the case. And now the last report of the Biden administration, as revealed today, shows that inflation is still about 4.5% higher over the past 3 months. This is an indictment on the Biden administration's mismanagement of the inflation crisis and their lack of transparency in addressing it. As for tackling inflation and interest rates, the President has made his position on this very clear. He wants interest rates to be lower, he wants inflation to be lower, and he believes that the whole of government economic approach that this administration is taking will result in lower inflation. I have said that from this podium many times. The President had record low interest rates and inflation rates in his first term. He believes that the economy can handle it and withstand it. And we're doing a lot to tackle the inflation effort on this front. It's a whole of government economic approach, and I've talked about what we're doing to tackle inflation quite a few times from this podium.
What about the reciprocal tariffs? That's going to come before Prime Minister Modi's visit tomorrow.
I do believe it will come before the Prime Minister's visit tomorrow, and I will let the President discuss the details on the reciprocal tariff front. But this is something he believes strongly in, and it's very simple logic as to why the President wants to impose reciprocal tariffs. It's the golden rule, which we all learned when we were growing up in school. Treat others the way you want to be treated, and far too many nations around this world have been ripping off the United States of America for far too long, and that's why the President believes this will be a great policy that will benefit American workers and improve our national security. JJ.
On Doge and the fraud claims, Elon Musk in the Oval yesterday gave us some information on that. We're just wondering if there's some proof, evidence. Is the White House willing to share evidence of those fraud claims, or can Elon Musk come to the briefing room and share material evidence of what he's talking about?
Sure, I would love for Elon Musk to come to the briefing room. That's why we had him go to the Oval Office yesterday, where I think he provided great answers. He was speaking in layman's terms, speaking common sense to all of you in the media, but also to Americans at home. But I would say especially to all of you in the media, because I think it's a real fallacy that there's this alleged lack of transparency when it comes to Doge. President Trump and Elon Musk have been incredibly transparent on what Doge is doing. There is an X account with the Doge handle. They are tweeting out what they are doing on a daily basis. They have a website where they are posting the receipts of the contracts that they are reviewing and the payments that they have stopped from going out the door. The secretaries of our departments have stopped from going out the door. And I would also say that before it was Elon Musk making our government efficient and accountable, it was some unnamed bureaucrat that none of you knew. Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. He's also now one of the most highly scrutinized men in the world alongside President Trump because of what he's doing and the access that he is allowing. So there's great transparency. As for the actual receipts, we are happy to provide them, and I actually brought some today because all of you know I love to bring the receipts. We have contracts upon contracts that we can send and provide this information to you. Let me be very clear. We are not trying to hide anything. We have been incredibly transparent, and we will continue to be. These are screenshots of contracts that Doge found across our government. This is a DEI contract, $36,000 for U.S. citizenship and immigration services. That is against the president's policies and his America First agenda. This is a $3.4 million contract, a Council for Inclusive Innovation at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, Department of Commerce, another DEI contract that Doge identified. I can continue to go through these. Oh, I love this one, $57,000 for climate change in Sri Lanka. What is this doing to continue the interests of the American people? Absolutely nothing. These are the line items across the federal government that Doge is identifying daily. They're moving very fast. There's a lot of paper that we can show you, but we're happy to do it. This administration has been more than transparent about what Doge is doing. And here's one of their tweets that they posted about the mine. I believe this is in Pennsylvania, where the federal employee retirement system is being processed. Did anybody know this was even happening in our country before Elon Musk talked about it in the Oval Office yesterday? A lot of Americans didn't. So we are providing transparency and accessibility on a daily basis when it comes to Doge. And I also have a Doge daily report, if anybody would like it, on all of the things that they are identifying and finding. We're happy to provide this information to you. We're talking about it every single day.
Are all those things you just mentioned fraud, or are they waste, or are they just contrary to the president's policies?
I would argue that all of these things are fraudulent, they are wasteful, and they are an abuse of the American taxpayer's dollar. This is not what the government should be spending money on. It's contrary to the president's priorities and agenda. And again, we can continue to provide you the receipts for all of the fraud, waste, and abuse. And if anybody in here wants to argue that the federal government is not fraudulent in some capacity, be my guest, because I think the American people watching at home would beg to differ.
Caroline?
Mary.
Hey, more on the judges. Does the White House believe the courts have the authority to issue these nationwide injunctions?
We believe that the injunctions that have been issued by these judges have no basis in the law and have no grounds, and we will, again, as the president said very clearly yesterday, comply with these orders, but it is the administration's position that we will also ultimately be vindicated, and the president's executive actions that he took were completely within the law, they were constitutional, and we look forward to the day where he can continue to implement his agenda. And I would just add, it's our view that this is the continuation of the weaponization of justice that we have seen against President Trump. He fought it for 2 years on the campaign trail. It won't stop him now. Brian.
Yes. I want to go back to Doge just for a second. Earlier, the subcommittee headed by Chairman Marjorie Taylor Greene, her and her staff discovered $2.7 trillion in improper payments to Medicare, Medicaid, overseas, to people who should not have gotten it. Some of this room might have missed that press conference. Can you elaborate on what the president is thinking at this point?
Well, again, that's another example. There's a very long list of the fraud, waste, and abuse that Doge is identifying on a daily basis. Elon Musk also talked about yesterday about Social Security payments that are going out the door for people who are no longer with us, unfortunately. I would say that is certainly fraud. There's also a lot of contracts they've identified that, just as a hypothetical example, are $1 million, but only 500,000 went out the door. So where's the rest of that cash? And so that's the thing. Those are the things that Doge is working on every single day. And I would just remind everybody in this room, this is what President Trump campaigned on doing. He's delivering on a promise that 77 million people elected him to do. James.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Two foreign policy questions, if I may.
Sure.
First, the statement that was released after this morning's phone calls identified Mr. Witkoff as the special envoy who will be part of the delegation that undertakes to resolve the Russia-Ukraine war. I had thought that that individual was General Kellogg, and so can you clear that up?
Sure, I'd be happy to. As you mentioned, the president, in his truth, following the phone call with Vladimir Putin, said that he has asked Secretary of State Rubio, the director of the CIA, John Ratcliffe, our national security advisor here at the White House, Michael Watts, and Steve Witkoff to lead the negotiations. As for General Keith Kellogg, he remains a critical part of this team in this effort. He's played a tremendous role in getting the negotiations to this point, and he's very much still part of the Trump administration.
The other subject is Iran. I took note of President Trump's comments in his Super Bowl interview with our colleague Brett Baer to the effect that he wants to do a deal with Iran. However, that interview appeared after the supreme leader of Iran, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, had already ruled out any additional negotiations with the United States. So kind of a two-part question. A, what gives the president any confidence that Iran will come to the table? And B, more fundamentally, why is the president interested in doing a deal with Iran instead of doing everything he can, perhaps short of U.S. military intervention, to try and hasten the end of what many of his own supporters regard as an evil regime?
Well, the president has made it very clear that he will never allow Iran to have nuclear capabilities. That is a red line that he has drawn, and he will not allow that to happen. But you asked why President Trump wants to make a deal. I would remind you, he's the master of the art of the deal. He is America's deal maker in chief. He leads from a position of securing peace through strength. And I think time and time again already, in just 4 weeks, we have seen the president being able to negotiate successful deals with our partners, our adversaries all around this world. The release of Mark Fogel just last night is something that I think speaks to the president's deal-making ability. This is something that the Biden administration allegedly tried to do for 3.5 years. I think you all should go back and ask some of those Biden administration officials what they even tried to do and why weren't they successful, because for 3.5 years Mark Fogel sat in a Russian prison and it took President Trump 3 weeks to get him back on American soil. There's nobody better at making deals than Donald Trump. Phil Wegman.
Thank you. Two foreign policy questions. Ukrainian President Zelensky has said after the war that he wants NATO membership or nuclear weapons. We heard Defense Secretary Hegseth say that NATO membership was unrealistic. What's the president's view on the other option, on a nuclear Ukraine?
I have not talked to President Trump about Ukraine's NATO membership or their nuclear capabilities. I would leave it to him to discuss. But I will tell you again that Secretary Rubio and also the Vice President, J.D. Vance, will be meeting directly with President Zelensky in Munich on Friday, and I'm sure they will provide a readout of that conversation and that discussion.
And then the second question, given that this administration has called on Europe to take more responsibility for their own defense, I'm wondering, will the EU or any other European nation other than Ukraine be involved in these peace talks?
I don't have any European nations who are involved currently to read out for you. Certainly, the president has employed a very strong team or deployed a very strong team to continue these negotiations. And the fact that he was on the phone with both President Putin and President Zelensky today shows that he's very much involved in this effort as well.
And then just a follow-up, I guess.
Sure.
Should we expect the president to negotiate in person with Zelensky and Putin?
I don't have anything to read out on that for you today. Maggie, good to see you.
Thanks for taking the question. You talked about the transparency with Doge and Elon Musk's press availability yesterday. There is a conflict of interest law in place that says that people who have personal interests can't interact with government entities that could touch on those. Has President Trump signed a waiver for Elon Musk? Does such a thing exist? If it does, will you guys release it in the interest of transparency that he's committed to?
I have not seen the law that you are referring to. What I can tell you is that Elon Musk, as I've confirmed before, is a special government employee. He is filing the proper financial disclosure, and he is complying with all applicable federal laws. As you also heard, Elon address this directly yesterday in the alleged conflict of interest, and he said everything he's doing is very public, and if you all perceive a conflict of interest, you're welcome to bring that up. And as the president said, if he feels like Elon is engaging in something that's a conflict of interest, he will tell Elon not to do that. And Elon also said yesterday that before he moves forward with anything, he consults with the President of the United States. So we're very confident with the ethics and the guardrails that have been put in place here. Caitlin.
Thanks, Caroline. I have a few things for you, but on the commitment by President Trump, he said that he and President Putin agreed to visit each other's respective nations. Are there any preconditions that President Trump has that President Putin must do before he goes and meets with him, withdrawing some forces, withdrawing all forces, anything like that?
Not that I'm aware of. That doesn't mean they don't exist, but I was just talking with the president in our national security team. I wasn't made aware of any conditions, but if they exist, I'm happy to provide those.
And on the president himself, he styles himself as this master negotiator. He is now deploying these negotiations, saying that they start immediately. We did hear from the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, though, today saying that NATO membership is not realistic for Ukraine, and neither is returning to pre-2014 borders. Aren't they giving away bargaining chips before these negotiations have even started?
Again, I haven't talked to the president about Ukraine's NATO membership, and he appointed several individuals to negotiate on his behalf. He's directly involved in these negotiations as well, and I'm sure if you ask him that question in the near future, when you're able to, he'll give you an answer. I just don't want to get ahead of him on it.
And final thing for you, which White House official made the decision to bar the AP reporter from the Oval Office and the diplomatic reception room last night?
Well, first of all, let me just set the record straight. It is a privilege to cover this White House. It's a privilege to be the White House press secretary. And nobody has the right to go into the Oval Office and ask the President of the United States questions. That's an invitation that is given. And there are hundreds of outlets on this campus, many of you in this room who don't have the privilege of being part of that pool every single day and getting to ask the President questions. We reserve the right to decide who gets to go into the Oval Office, and you all have credentials to be here, including the Associated Press, who is in this briefing room today.
But isn't it retaliatory in nature is the argument, because the reason that the AP was barred, which they said was because they're not using the phrase Gulf of America, they're using Gulf of Mexico in line with their standards. And so the question here is this setting a precedent that this White House will retaliate against reporters who don't use the language that you guys believe reporters should use? And how does that align with the First Amendment commitment that you were just talking about?
I was very upfront in my briefing on day one that if we feel that there are lies being pushed by outlets in this room, we are going to hold those lies accountable. And it is a fact that the body of water off the coast of Louisiana is called the Gulf of America. And I'm not sure why news outlets don't want to call it that, but that is what it is. The Secretary of Interior has made that the official designation in the Geographical Identification Name Server, and Apple has recognized that, Google has recognized that, pretty much every other outlet in this room has recognized that body of water as the Gulf of America, and it's very important to this administration that we get that right, not just for people here at home, but also for the rest of the world. Sure.
America!
The prisoner exchange with Russia coming at the same time as the president is now announcing negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. The timing of that is hard to ignore. Was Ukraine discussed as part of this prisoner swap?
I was not involved in those discussions, so I can't comment on whether that came up or not. What I can say is that this was a very good deal for the United States of America and for the rest of the world. As you know, we have confirmed that the Russian who will be returning home very soon, Alexander Vinnik, was a non-violent crypto criminal, and as part of this exchange, he has forfeited more than $100 million that he obtained in that illegal crime. And in exchange, of course, we got Mark Fogel, who is a middle school teacher who kissed the American soil, but kissed the ground last night when he returned to the United States of America. It was a great deal and a great day for our country, and I think everybody, regardless of political affiliation, agrees with that.
And was Russia made aware ahead of time of the parameters that the administration and Secretary Hegseth was going to be announcing today?
The NATO perimeters? Yes. I'm not sure. You'd have to ask Secretary Hegseth in the Defense Department on that, since he announced them. Jackie.
Thank you, Caroline. Just to be clear, so when we're listening for a shift in position on U.S. policy, should we only listen to the president and maybe not the Secretary of Defense? Because what he outlined today would represent a shift in U.S. policy.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I speak for the President of the United States behind this podium, and I will let him discuss that.
Can you tell us any more about the next hostage releases? I understand another American's coming out today.
Sure. I'm glad you asked. It speaks to President Trump's deal-making ability, and we can confirm the safe release of 1 American and 2 individuals from Belarus, one of whom worked for Radio Liberty. Out of respect for the privacy of these individuals, their request, we have no further details to announce on their identities, but we can confirm that 1 American was released today, and it's a remarkable victory on the heels of Mark Fogel returning to America last night.
Anything on who the U.S. might be releasing in exchange?
I don't have details on that at this moment. I don't have details on that at this moment. I do know that these 3 individuals have been released and are on their way home to their respective countries. Ouija.
Caroline, thank you so much. Can you explain how President Trump envisions the war in Russia and Ukraine coming to an end? Does he expect Ukraine to hand over all the territory in question?
Again, these negotiations are ongoing. I will allow the president to divulge any red lines that he may set, but I think as deals in the past have come to fruition, the president has proven one of the things that makes him a very effective negotiator is not revealing what he's anticipating from both sides, but he is at the forefront of these negotiations in addition to the very qualified individuals who he's tasked with speaking to both President Putin and President Zelensky.
And speaking of deals, a meeting with the President of the United States offers any foreign leader credibility. Was it part of the prisoner swap with Fogel that President Trump agreed to meet with Putin?
Again, I was already asked this question. I said I was not made aware of that, but we can certainly get you an answer on that. I'll check in with the NSC. Sure, Monica.
Thanks, Caroline. It's clear that this administration is dedicated to both truth and transparency. We know that with DOJ, but we also know that because this administration recently announced it's going to declassify the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr., JFK, and RFK. I'm wondering, is it likely that we're going to see more information regarding the assassination attempts on the president's life while he was on the campaign trail?
In regards to the assassination of the individuals you mentioned, President Trump signed that executive order directing the respective agencies to do it. I know that that process continues and is ongoing. He's committed to transparency in the declassification of these very important files that I think many Americans are not only interested in learning about, but also have the right to know about. As for the 2 heinous assassination attempts on the president's life, he's spoken to this publicly. I've spoken to him about it privately, and as he said publicly to all of you, he feels he has a right to know about further information about the individuals who tried to kill him, tried to take his life. And so if and when we get that information, I'll leave it up to the president to decide whether or not he would like to reveal it. But I believe in the effort of transparency that we've seen consistently from this president, he certainly will. Daniel.
Thanks, Caroline. I wanted to ask you about the $59 million that FEMA sent to New York City migrant hotels. Secretary Kristi Noem just put out a statement saying that she clawed back the full payment that FEMA activists unilaterally gave to NYC migrant hotels. She wrote, "Mark my words, there will not be a single penny spent that goes against the interest and safety of the American people." What does the response of the Trump administration send to any federal bureaucrats that are thinking about obstructing the president's agenda?
They will be held accountable. The president is signing executive orders daily, and he expects all officials across the administration, regardless if they are a political appointee or if they are a career bureaucrat, to adhere to the will of the American people and the 77 million Americans who re-elected President Trump. He is here for a reason, and he is focused every day on implementing his administration's goals and sending $59 million to a migrant hotel to house illegal immigrants when there are still people in North Carolina and California who have not received FEMA funding is not something that this administration is going to tolerate. Deanna.
Thank you so much, Caroline. One on New York and one on Russia, please. On New York City Comptroller Brad Lander is accusing DOJ of clawing back $80 million that was intended for New York City FEMA funding. wondering if you've heard about that figure, if that figure is accurate, and why that money was taken back.
I have not heard about that figure. Doge is moving very quickly, but I can get the receipts and gladly send them to you. I know that story is likely of great interest to the New York Post.
And then one
John.
on Russia, please.
Sure.
Is President Trump waiting for a kind of signal or an action from Putin to go to Russia? And would he be willing to go to Ukraine in the future?
I don't have any decisions to make on the president's potential visit to Russia or any in-person meeting at this time. John.
Thanks a lot, Caroline. Two questions, one on foreign policy, one on domestic policy. Following up on the president's call that he had with President Putin, does the president view Russia, does he view President Putin as an ally, as a partner, as a competitor, or as an adversary?
I believe this nation views Putin and Russia as a great competitor in the region, at times an adversary, but as the president has said as well, he enjoys having good diplomatic relationships with leaders around the world, finding that common ground, also calling them out when they are wrong, and leading from a position of peace through strength. That's the president's greatest strength, and we've seen that again, time and time again.
And then as you pointed out in your statement regarding the confirmation of Tulsi Gabbard, there was one Republican who voted against the nomination of Tulsi Gabbard. It was Senator Mitch McConnell. Similarly, how does the administration view Senator McConnell? Can he be a partner in the president's legislative agenda? Are you disappointed that he voted against not only Tulsi Gabbard, but also Pete Hegseth to be the defense secretary?
I think we're greatly disappointed in any Republican who chooses willfully to vote against the president's exceptionally qualified cabinet nominees and picks to lead his America First administration. Not a single Democrat swayed from voting against President Biden's nominees, and we know how many of them turned out. They turned out to be atrocious at their jobs, leaving America much worse than they were when they took the oath of office. And so I've said it repeatedly from this podium. I addressed it at the beginning of my remarks. We expect all Republicans to vote, to stay tough and strong, vote for President Trump's nominees so we can get to work and continue to work very hard to implement this president's agenda. Sure.
Thank you, Caroline. On South Korea is currently in a chaotic situation. How does the President Trump react to the current chaotic situation in South Korea? Secondly, if South Korea needs help from United States, what role do you think the U.S. will play?
Sure. I haven't spoken to the president about the ongoing situation in South Korea. I would defer you to his previous statements. And I can also see if I can get you something new from the National Security Council, who I'm very confident the officials that are focused on South Korea are on this. I just haven't spoken to them about it, but I'm happy to provide that for you. Yes.
Thank you, Caroline. Does Elon Musk have power of the presidency?
Absolutely not.
Right.
That's a ridiculous question.
I asked that question because, the Democrats have been hurling insults at Elon Musk, hurling attacks, calling him President Musk. Most recently, Jamie Raskin, the congressman, took it a step further, calling for Musk's impeachment, saying that he somehow usurped the power of the presidency. What's your response?
It's utterly ridiculous. Elon Musk addressed this in the Oval Office yesterday. The president addressed it as well. Elon Musk is serving at the pleasure of the president, just like everybody else on this team. He takes directives directly from the president of the United States. And I think some of the comments that you referred to are nothing more than a failed attempt from the media and from Democrats to try to sow division in this White House. We saw them do it in the first term. We're not going to let them do it in the second term. This is a unified team who is working at the pleasure of the president to do what's right for the American people. I have one more quick housekeeping note before I leave you all today. The president wanted me to share with all of you that he had a wonderful meeting with King Abdullah of Jordan yesterday. They discussed many things, including the Gaza Strip and its future at great length. The king would much prefer that the Palestinians stay in place, with the additional land to be used for new development, which would greatly create jobs at levels never seen before. But the president feels it would be much better and more majestic if these Palestinians could be moved to safer areas. I would just add to that the president remains wholeheartedly committed to seeing peace in the Middle East. And our Arab partners in the region have been tasked with coming up with a peace plan to present to the president. That is ongoing. King Abdullah mentioned that yesterday. He also committed to accepting 2,000 sick children from the Gaza Strip, which the president called a beautiful gesture. So the administration continues to work with our Arab partners in the region. We stand closely with our ally Israel, and the president has presented this big, new, bold idea to secure peace in the Middle East, and he is not going to waver from that. And we look forward to seeing that goal of this administration achieved as well. Thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you very soon. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, we're going to go ahead and call it there. I want to thank you guys for hanging out with me. It's been a good time. And, well, we'll have to do this some more. If you like what I'm doing, do me a favor, make sure you hit that thumbs up on the way out the door. Make sure you subscribe if you're not subscribed. And if you're not subscribed to the Local Prepper channel, go look for that. Local Prepper, all one word, and I shall see you when I see you.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, hello, everyone. Bye-bye.